What will be expected of you as a practicing engineer? So, we're trying to get right down to the issue. This doesn't start with ethics. Ethics they're rules. Let's build up the case to where we need rules. And that's what they want to see. And what you're going to find through this whole presentation, the emphasis really is on profession and professionals. And in fact, ethics are a product of. And we'll develop through that. So, simple definitions, morals. We all have them, and we have codes of, and what have you. Ethics are by groups, which can be religious or general groups or professions. Ethical behavior simply is when you conform to the ethical codes set forth by your profession or whatever group it is. There are three levels we want to talk about. These are three general levels. There's a personal level of ethics. There are business ethics. You can say, oh, that's business ethics. And then the one we're going to talk about is professional ethics. Let's talk about some things called the fear of ethics. I look at this crowd, and I think most of you do remember the Tylenol scare that took place in Chicago in 1972. Or maybe you may be like me. You remember the time, but you don't remember it today, or something like that. But what happened there? It was a situation where somebody played around with Tylenol capsules. In fact, capsules today don't look like capsules in 1972. In 1972, there were little beads inside a plastic container, so to speak. They were ruled out after this, and as a direct result of this. So you had a situation where 7 people in Chicago, 7, died as a result of potassium cyanate put in place of the pills and the like. Well, what did Johnson & Johnson, the maker of Tylenol, do? Once it was discovered that this tampering had happened and 7 people were dead very shortly, within days, Johnson & Johnson pulled every Tylenol in the world off the shelf. Better believe it cost them something. So living up to an ethical standard could impose immediate cost. Big point. Now, in the long term, Johnson & Johnson today is respected as one of the most ethical businesses anywhere because they acted in the way they should have. The second case is Ford and Firestone. Anybody bought any Firestone tires lately? Probably haven't. Firestone's out of business. Ford and Firestone had a real problem. Their SUVs in about 1992 were problematic in the sense that somehow they were turning vehicles over and causing all sorts, there were accidents being caused. And let's see, Ford was here and Firestone was here, and they were doing this. It took a year or so of reporting and what have you for, in fact, these two companies to come to grips. And part of the coming to grips was Firestone went out of business. Ford took a huge hit in their sales. So they are not living up to the ethical standards. Future liability costs one company their existence, costs another company a big part of their revenues over a period of time. So these are good references that you can point out. You may have to tell a little bit about the situation as I did, but let people know there are real examples of the fear of ethics. Real fear for living up to and having to pay the price and not living up to and paying the price. So the first group we want to talk about is personal ethics, and not talking long, but golden rule, do unto others you'd have them do unto you. There's certain things ingrained in my memory. I can't remember my grandkid's name, but I can remember the Boy Scout law. A scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, brave, clean, and reverent. There are 12 items there. And that is embedded in my brain. I can't get it out. And so we do have these personal ethics issue, or group ethics in the case of the Boy Scouts. Business ethics, I came across this, I think it may have been Harold Aldridge that put me onto it. And I find this, of the business ethics that have been published, straightforward and quite meaningful. And it comes from Wharton Business School in the University of Pennsylvania. It says the first premise of ethical behavior, business behavior, is a consideration of the welfare for others. Two groups: those who are involved in the business transactions and those who are not involved in the business transactions but are affected by the transaction. The second element of the Wharton's Code of Business Ethics is trust is the fundamental essential to business transactions. Do you like dealing with people you don't trust? Most of us don't. We don't. You know, I'll find somebody else to buy from or work with or what have you. Sometimes you do get forced to do it, and what you've got to do is check everything they do. So it adds a tremendous cost to doing business with them if you have to back check to know what's going on in there. So it is necessary that you have to trust. If you can't trust the people you're working with, you're going to have to do layers and layers of checking and double checking their work. So better find somebody you have common sense of ethics with and work with them. We talked about others, those that you were having, that were in the transaction, and those who weren't. Some of the others, well, the staff and subordinates, your staff and your subordinates. The company management. Company shareholders. Okay. Company shareholders, in some cases, a lot of cases in engineering companies, there are some of the people who work there, and gosh, I know from much of my life, I worked with Woodward Clyde, and my wife swore we'd never get a cent back out of the investments we made over the years. Turned out she was wrong. But here's a good group. Competitors. What about, that dirty so-and-so down the street? Remember always that your competitor is also a professional colleague. And when we get smart enough to start dealing with it in that sense, then we'll move our way back up the ladder to being respected by outsiders. Lenders, gee whiz, they may be involved or not, but the money may. Laying out, because it affects a couple of these in the beginning. Those of us who had operations on the West Coast, it was much more prevalent there. But residential housing, by the way, do we have these Brian? We do have the handout. It's got the slides. Okay. Anybody care for any more? I'm not sure we got enough, but we'll work them, see. In the West Coast in the early 80s, huge boom south of here, a little bit in this area, of rapidly developing residential areas. And by the way, look around you and you see a lot of beautiful sites on hillsides and what have you. And unfortunately, a lot of those had trouble, not just because of that, because people did deep valley fills down in San Diego area. Sometimes the valley fills were 100 feet. Well, Woodward Clyde learned a big lesson in those years. We coughed up $25 million in 5 years because one of our offices didn't pay much attention to the fact that we could get settlements in those situations, and it's almost a contagion. Once a house has been damaged in one of these areas, all other houses in the neighborhood claim diminution of value, because when they try to sell, you diminish the value of all the houses in the area. So we learned a very huge lesson in those days. So it's general public is affected. Subcontractors are the other who. Consultants, future project owners. Now, and that is the residential owner. Think about this. If you're in the most geo firms have kind of walked away from the residential market because it is so contentious, in that generally you're doing work for a contractor, owner, residential developer, whose purpose is to sell those houses within 6 months. They're thinking a very short risk spectrum. I reviewed a report back 6 or 8, 10 years ago where the engineer put forth the idea of you can do it this way, which is less risky. Remove and replace the upper 5 feet of material for residential. Or you can, he just described a limited treatment. Whichever risk you're willing to take. Well, turns out the field management people for the contractor decided they'd take the cheaper one. Turns out the company who did the work, who was building the residential development, and us companies ended up paying the real price. The risk developed later than 6 months. The person who was responsible for the risk has sold that off onto somebody else and gone away, and the situation. So anyone affected by the project is another in this whole narrative. The other element of business ethics, and Laura Nash is an ethics specialist at Harvard Business School, and wrote a book a couple of years ago. This one did come from Harl, I remember. And she proposed questions if you're involved in what you think is an ethical question in a business decision. And I'm going to use this a little later. Is it right? Yes. No. That's not an acceptable answer. If you think the answer is yes to that, you need to write out what you think. What is your logic for saying yes, or what is your logic for saying no? Is it fair? The same thing. Am I hurting anyone? Could I disclose this to a respected mentor or the general public? How would I like that? Would I tell my child to do this? Does it pass the stink test? Yeah, that's a very ambiguous phrase, but I think you'll find that if you're faced with an ethical issue and you sit down and write down the answer to these questions in a long form, put it aside, and come back the next day, you'll have a new perspective on whether it is an ethical issue or whether it's not. Some things are borderline. So, this is one way of dealing. Laura Nash has proposed this, and I do think, like I say, it looks simplistic to begin with. But if you truly don't just answer short things, develop an answer, develop the logic for your answer, you will go a long way, individuals will go a long way to answering their own issue about, is this ethical or not? Now remember, we're still in the business ethics realm, but I think it can be used otherwise. Professional ethics. The very first one was the Hippocratic Oath that we know of for the medical profession. The first tenet of the Hippocratic Oath, anybody? First, do no harm. The next one was AIPG. I mentioned AIPG earlier because that's the one we did a head-to-head comparison with the training groups, and when they reported back, they said, you know, one says shall, one says will, or one says shall and one says would. There's one other group that sometimes uses another word. ASCE's Code of Ethics in many states has been adopted as the regulation. And they say you will do these things. So they've taken it one step beyond. Again, you can look at yours and see what your state is, but the ones I've looked at and the ones I've talked to friends about often adopt this group developed first in 1917 and subsequently revised. ACEC has, has a code of ethics. The National Association of Environmental Professionals, CREED, for environmental professionals. Okay, so we laid some groundwork here. So we asked the students, so what is a professional? What defines a professional? It is a vocation where people who qualify must meet the following conditions. They have advanced education and training. Secondarily, that their work involves application of intellectual skills. In other words, you don't go pick the answer out of a book. It is bringing that, what you learned, bringing it together and solving problems. That is a fairly well received, simplistic, though it is, definition of what a profession is. That if you have the advanced education and knowledge and you apply those, that is what a profession is. So while ethics, as it says here, is the subject of this talk, the driving issue is profession, which I want to get around to anyway. So why do professionals need rules for guiding, rules or codes of ethics? Why do we need these? Well, if we don't make the rules and don't, in fact, enforce the rules to the extent we can, and we do try to do it through ASCE, somebody's going to make those rules for us. And it may not be as appropriate as we think they should be. So ASCE is taking the issue to assure that all professional acts will be in the interest of the general public. That's why we think. We said that to be a professional, you've got to have advanced training and advanced education, and the decisions you make must be based on intellectual processes. Can every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street judge those decisions? No. Who can judge those decisions? You can. I can. And like I say, if we don't do it, then others will, and it will make a mess of this thing. We will have failed if we don't do this. That's what it comes down to. So how can the public be protected from these professionals? And they can be protected if the professions establish a code of ethics and somebody makes it work. One of the topics you're going to be faced with in the second half of this, I think Arlene's adopted, is, if you would, ratting out another professional. Or, in better terms, if you see a professional who is not living up to the civil engineer who is not living up to the code of ethics, do you report them? There is a standing group in ASCE who takes these issues in and makes a judgment and consequences. Some of you remember a vice president we had under Richard Nixon by the name of Spiro Agnew. From Maryland. Yep. More specifically from Baltimore, Maryland. And Spiro had been the mayor of Baltimore, Maryland. And having lived close to Baltimore and Maryland, it's not unlike some of the other Northeast states where a lot of things of nefarious nature go on. In terms of getting jobs and what have you. So, what happened?
Let me guess, you don't live it
No. So, how can we protect by establishing a code of ethics? So, who could and should make these rules? The point is, this is the only group that can make the rules, and the only group that can enforce the rules. And what happened? There was two men from Baltimore who were the named partners of a firm, fessed up to giving a bribe to Spiro Agnew in the West Wing of the White House. And only by some unknown negotiations, Agnew got to resign and get out of the country. The two civil engineers were dismissed from ASCE. They lost their membership in ASCE after the board processing. And frankly, the firm was sold and changed names, and their reputations were completely ruined. But in fact, this was kind of standard operating procedure. We've got to stop that stuff. That's what it comes down to. Who can and should make the rules, and who can, in fact, enforce the rules. So now we finally get around to ASCE's ethical principles. And we've got principles, and then we've got canons. This is the overview element. We're going to step into the 7 canons in a minute. And what it says is that the principles are: engineers uphold and advance the integrity, honor, and dignity of the engineering profession by using the knowledge and skills to enhance human health and the environment, being honest and impartial, serving, oops, I see a hand. Okay. Striving to increase their competency, prestige, and the engineering profession, and supporting professional and technical societies. That sounds like ASCE is just looking after themselves. If we don't have a central organization, who's going to do it? So, for those of us who have criticized from time to time ASCE, this is the logical group, the American Society of Civil Engineers. It's been at this for a long time. This is what we should rely on. Now, the canons are 7. And if you can kind of commit one to memory without even looking at the breakdown, this is it. What I say to students, have you been to a movie lately that has a mountain? When it opens a production, it says Paramount Films. Well, think of Paramount. It means the ultimate, the highest, nothing beyond that. To hold paramount safety, health, and welfare of the public. And there's a break here. And shall strive to comply with the principles of sustainable development in the performance of their professional duties. In, I guess it was the late 80s, early 90s, ASCE the issue of environmental issues came up, sustainability in particular. And there was an effort to create a separate canon, one more to add on. After quite a bit of back and forth, I understand, Doug Morehouse, I know, was a part of that group that did it, worked on that. This was a compromise. Some didn't want any mention of sustainable development or environmental issues. Others said we've got to have a separate, but notice the shall hold and the other shall strive. So that's what it is. I think one day it will be changed, but that's my opinion. So here are a group of the subheadings. As I do this, very pragmatic issue here is I can't run these down to page. And sometimes there are 6 or 7 of them, but starting on page 13, you've got every one of these in greater detail. It says, you recognize that the lives of the general public are dependent on engineering judgments. That approval and seals only those documents that you prepared or reviewed or prepared by them. If I'd understood this a lot younger in my career, I might have had some things to say about being a part of looking at a contractor's claim and incidentally coming across some contractor submitted documents which had really not anything to do with the claim. They had a stamp by a guy, Joe Blow. And I saw everything. I said, where's Joe around? He hadn't run into Joe. Well, Joe left here about a year ago, but he left his PE seal here that I said, we need to settle this damn thing right now. Now, I had no idea what my responsibilities were. I wasn't smart enough, but that's the kind of thing that should have. I can give you another one that is probably in some ways worse. Again, my personal involvement, state of West Virginia, after the failure of Buffalo Creek, went through a several-year period of identifying and identified over close to 500 impoundments, some as high as 500 feet, that were just dumped cold with water standing behind them. And we set up a procedure. I was working for Woodward Clyde, but I got the joy of flying to West Virginia once a week. And we worked with, it was the Department of Mineral Resources, the group that was in charge. And we saw this submittal coming in from a number of the companies, signed by the same individual. And the stuff looked suspicious. It just didn't look all that good. So we began to inquire. Turns out this individual had a BS degree in mining engineering, and his specialty was mine ventilation. He was signing every one of these for one particular company. We went to the Attorney General of the state at that point in time and said, this is a problem. We were told this is not a problem because in the state of West Virginia, if you had a PE, you'd pass it. There was only one PE license in the state. I think they've since rectified some of those issues, but certainly by any measure of this that says approve and seal, only those documents are reviewed by and prepared by them, and also that you've done them and you're competent to do them. Constructive, you can see them, committed to improve the environment. So there are things that I wish I'd have known earlier. I might have done something different. I might have been in a position where I was too gutless to deal with it. Engineers shall perform, this is the one really that pertains to it, shall perform services only in areas of their competency. Now this sometimes has created a little bit of a dilemma. I spent a lot of my career in the Washington, D.C. area working on the Washington Metropolitan Subway System. And there, and DeLuc Cather was the principal engineer, and every drawing was stamped by the chief engineer of DeLuc Cather. I knew what his qualifications were and what have you. They were co-signed by somebody else. So you can have people under you, as it says here, as a definition, who you trust and you're willing to put your... They were required to put his, as the chief engineer, he was required to have his seal on it, but he saw to it that there were people working under him who were qualified, and in essence, he took responsibility for their work. So it's not you have to know everything that's being done, but you've got to have people who work for you, who report to you, and are trusted by you in order to go through that step. Shall issue public statements only in objective and truthful manner. Yeah, we got the best engineering company around. It's a big group. So endeavor to extend the public knowledge of civil engineering and participate in disseminating that and not participate in unfair or untrue exaggerations about civil engineering. We are what we are. Expert witness. Shall express. I had a couple of friends talk this morning about this very issue. Maybe they'll bring up some issues. You shall express an opinion only based on your adequate knowledge of the fact. Anybody ever work for a lawyer? Yeah, a bunch of us have. I can only recall personal experience and on a job where I had worked on for a construction company. There was an accident that occurred. I was pulled back into it, and in come the lawyers, and they brought their own experts. And what the lawyer said to me to begin with, and I think I was a little more mature at this point in time, said, you have to work under my code of ethics. I said, nope, I don't. He said, well, then you won't work on the job. So he went to the client. The client says, yes, he will. And so I would suggest that if you're dealing with somebody in a claim situation or any kind of legal situation, I think I would ask the attorney on my side to question. What is your code of ethics? Did you work under your code or or the attorney's code, remember, attorney's codes are very different. They have a different responsibility. They are charged under their code of ethics to be an advocate. That is nothing wrong with Joe Blow, the lawyer, standing up for a bloody axe murderer. He is there to do the best job of advocacy for that axe murderer. We're not. We're there to represent public health, safety, and welfare. We have a different set of requirements, and the requirements are farther. As I say, we love to pick on lawyers, but you need to know what they're charged with. Their ethics code is very different from ours. Issue no statement of criticism or argument on engineering matters which are inspired or paid for by interested party unless the party is identified, and shall be dignified, modest in explaining their work and merits. 4, engineers shall act in professional manners for each employer or client as faithful agents and trustees, and shall avoid conflicts of interest. This is often, people raise the concern that this, in some ways, is the closest to being in conflict with Canon 1. Let's see, you're supposed to act on behalf of your faithful agent of your employer and the like, but you have a first responsibility to the general public. So just know that that's an issue that is raised from time to time. Canon 1 is Canon 1 for a reason. So think through, but look at the various, shall not accept compensation for more than one party or pertaining to the same project. Not accept professional employment outside their work without the knowledge of their employers. I think Woodward Clyde did have one claim. An employer who was moonlighting using the labs of Woodward Clyde at that point in time, got sued for doing some less than quality work. And since this individual had, let's see, he had a pickup truck and a long handle shovel, and that was about the extent of his financial worth. So they came after Woodward Clyde. So there's a real reason for the company's. The company can allow an employee to do it, but the ethic is they should not be doing it. It's unethical to do that work without getting the employer's buy-in. Engineers shall build their reputation, professional reputation, on the merits of their service and shall not compete unfairly with others. What's unfair? All's fair in love and war. Look at them. Let's see. Not falsify, misrepresent. Shall give proper credit to engineering works to those whom credit is due. How about junior people working on a project? Do they get any notoriety, any naming in terms of the project? Maybe they did simple tasks. Maybe they don't deserve that kind of notification. But the second writer, if you would. In many cases, the principal writer is not the person whose name is at the bottom, if you would. So, and shall not maliciously or falsely injure professional reputation of another engineer. Can't be the bad guy. Engineers shall act in such a manner as to uphold and enhance the honor, integrity, and dignity of the engineering profession. Not engage in practices that are fraudulent and unethical. That seems reasonable enough. Be scrupulous and act in fidelity with for public employees and what have you. Zero tolerance for bribery. Strive to be transparent in procurement and execution of projects. The two guys we were talking about in Baltimore, somewhere in here, had a problem. Number 7, and this is one I bring out to students quite frequently. Engineers shall continue their professional development throughout their careers and shall provide for the professional development of those engineers under their supervision. I've often said to students, people looking for a job, If you find that your employer is not providing for your professional development in some fashion or other way, they don't have any money for that, you probably, it would be a good thing to start looking for another employer. Because obligated by this to see to the if you would, the leadership's professional development, but also all the people there. That could be as simple as holding what we used to call Monday brown bags. Bringing in, have someone come in and talk about a topic, but always keeping things in front of people. Grow the staff. Help them become the leaders of the firm. So, lastly, this is Arlen's issue. Code of Ethics, Article 3, Section 3.0. All members of society shall be familiar with the society's Code of Ethics. You need to know those 7 in detail, enough that you will be bound by their provisions. 3.0.1, violations. It is the duty of every society member to report promptly to the Committee on Professional Conduct any observed violation of the society's Code of Ethics. I just named 2 of you earlier that I should have reported. I really, truly wasn't aware of this, and I wonder how many people are aware. I think there are details in here that we all need to spend time with. And if you really want to learn them, teach them. Teach them to a group of kids who will sit around and ask you questions about what about this, what about that, what about this, what about that. It's a great little exercise for you as well and me as well as for them. One of the things, especially for students and people new coming in, I put this one in. It says, before taking actions on an ethical issue, especially one affecting others, which is almost every ethical issue affects others, do yourself a favor. Discuss your concerns with a respected professional, with an experienced professional you respect. Maybe they can shed some light on the issue that you hadn't thought about. 20, 25 years of experience gives you some reflections. And again, before I had injected in here at the same time, what I would recommend specifically is if you are this young person, let me go back real quick. Thought I had one more, but I don't. I want to go, I'm going to go back up one. Do yourself a favor. Okay. Go back to Laura Nash and look at her 5, 6 questions. Write down the answer to those questions. Sleep on them overnight. Go talk to a respected professional. Lay the case out. I've seen young folks who were very eager to do their be engineers and do the right thing and what have you, not really consider maybe the impact on other people the way they should. You know, I know damn well this should be this way. We probably all felt that way in some point in time. So we need to encourage people not to make lone wolf decisions. If in fact, it doesn't mean you have to accept, this is what I tell them, you don't have to accept their position, but you want to listen to it. You have to make a decision to do something. And if in fact you feel that your company has done something you consider unethical, then you better make a decision, is this the place I need to work? Do I want to be a part of this? So that's pretty much it. Now please, if you don't like this presentation, do your own. But young folks are looking to hear from the practitioners in particular in the community. You being there talking about the way you have to live every day is important to them because they're going to have, many of them are going to have to live the same life. And frankly, we can build a sense of profession better with this than virtually anything I know. I don't think the $5,000 per person in this room will measure up to half of this room doing this once a year to an ASCE student chapter group or any other young ASCE members. Let's go full scale. Now, this is business ethics now, practical implications of business ethics. Have you taken the mandatory training for business ethics? No, but if you say I did, then you'll save some money for training, which you can use to redecorate your office. Luckily, I haven't taken the training myself. I hear it's mostly common sense anyway. Yeah. I love Dilbert, man. He can spice up things all over the place.